Characteristics of fingerprint whorl pattern. Fingerprint whorl patterns have 4 other fingerprint templates. There are plain whorl, central pocket whorl, double loop whorl, and accidental whorl. Between 25 and 35% of the patterns encountered consist of whorls. In a whorl, some of the ridges make a turn through at least one circuit. Any fingerprint pattern which contains 2 or more deltas will be a whorl pattern. In the scheme of classification, you can make the assumption that if a pattern contains no deltas, then it is an arch. If it contains 1, and only 1, delta, it will be a loop, and if it contains 2 or more, it will always be a whorl. If a pattern does contain more than 2 deltas, it will always be an accidental whorl. Plain whorls. As with any whorl, there must be more than one valid delta or else it is a loop. If you look at image A, you should be able to identify the 2 deltas. If not, then look at image B and you will see that they're displayed in the red boxes. The technical definition of a plain whorl is a whorl which consists of 1 or more ridges which make or tend to make a complete circuit, with 2 deltas, between which an imaginary line is drawn and at least one recurving ridge within the inner pattern area is cut or touched. Notice the inner area of the pattern, that is the area which tends to form a circle. This is what you would call the inner pattern area, and it is what make a whorl look like a whorl. Okay, now looking at the specific ridges that are making or trying to make the circle, let's say we were to draw an imaginary line between the 2 deltas, the red line in image C. Then we can see that this line does intersect the same lines or line that tend to form the circle. Alright, now let's take a closer look, so maybe this will become more clear about what is sufficient and what is not sufficient to be a plain whorl. Take a look at image D and you can see the inner pattern area in yellow that forms or tends to form the circle part of the loop. Notice now that if we draw a line from delta to delta, we do not intersect the lines that are forming the circle. The same thing is true for image E. Take a look at image E and see if you can determine the inner pattern, that being the ridges that form or tend to form a circle. Can you see that if a line is drawn again from delta to delta, that no lines that form the circle are intersected? Now look at image F and see if you can identify the ridges that are forming or tending to form the circle or inner pattern. Notice now that when we draw a line from delta to delta, that this inner pattern, or the lines forming the circle, are intersected. Image D and image E are examples of central pocket whorls. Image F is a plain whorl. This is the first part of identifying a particular whorl. In this process we merely identify the pattern type. In this case we have identified what it takes to be a plain whorl. Central pocket whorls. A central pocket whorl consists of at least one recurving ridge, or an obstruction at right angles to the line of flow, with 2 deltas, between which when an imaginary line is drawn, no recurving ridge within the pattern area is cut or touched. If you look at the pattern area of the 3 images at left, you will notice that the actual lines that make a circle are very close to the center, and there are not very many of them. In fact, only about 2 or 3 on image G and about the same on image H. To make the determination of the type of pattern, we must draw an imaginary line between the 2 deltas that appear on the print. In image I have drawn a red line to act as the imaginary line between the 2 deltas. And if you study this, you will see that the ridges that form the inner pattern are not crossed by this imaginary line. This makes it a central pocket whorl by definition. If the ridges of the inner pattern were crossed, then this would be a plain whorl. Let's look at some comparisons between a central pocket whorl and the other types. When compared side by side, the differences become a little more obvious. If you look at image G, you can see that the imaginary line, in red, does not cut across any ridges which form the inner pattern area. But if you look at image H, you can see that the imaginary line does, in fact, cut across the inner pattern area, or the ridges which form or tend to form a circle. The pattern in image I might at first glance be taken for a plain whorl, because if you were to draw the imaginary line, it would cut the pattern area. But you will notice there are 2 core areas in this pattern, which are shown by the red pointers. Because of the 2 cores, this pattern is a double loop whorl. Double loop whorls. A double loop whorl consists of two separate and distinct loop formations with two separate and distinct shoulders and two deltas. The technical definition for this pattern type is fairly straightforward. There must be two separate and distinct shoulders for each core. If you look at images J and image K, you can clearly see that there appears to be two separate loops inside of this whorl. In most cases this means that the pattern will most likely be a double loop whorl, but not always. The problem lies in the separate and distinct shoulder requirement sometimes. If you look at image L, you can clearly see that there are separate and distinct shoulders created and shown in the red and blue. The shoulders of each core must comprise separate lines. This means that they can't be the same, obviously. By using a little creative editing, I have now changed image L and the way it appears in image M. The significant change is that I have edited this image so that both the parent shoulders, cores, now use the same line, indicated in red. Because they both now use the same line to form the shoulders of each core, this is no longer a valid double loop whorl. If there is a problem with identifying a double loop whorl, it is probably because of the failure to either identify that there is a separate and distinct shoulder to each core. The last, accidental whorl. Under this heading are the relatively small number of patterns too irregular in outline to be grouped with central pocket loops and double loops. They have two or more deltas and a combination or fusion of two or more types of patterns, not including the plain, radial or ulnar arch. This category also includes any freak pattern or accidental formation that does not conform to any conventional type. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.